Hello everybody, good evening. This is the GCSE French revision session with myself, Mrs Williams, and Madame Pritchard, who will be presenting the second half of tonight's revision session. So I'm just going to go through the two sessions that I produced a couple of weeks ago. So the first being Le Jeu de Rôle, the role play for the oral exam. So if I just give you as well, though, the actual 4 sessions that have been produced for this session in 2023. So the first session that I will be going through will be the role play. I'll jump then to the last one because that's the other one that I was responsible for, which was the sub-theme Enterprise, Employability and Future Plans. And then Madame Pritchard will take over and she will speak about recycling language and giving opinions using adjectives. So if I spend the first 10 minutes just going through what my presentation on the oral exam, the role play question was, and then I'll move on to the sub-theme Enterprise, Employability and Future Plans. So this is the presentation that I used. The objectives were to familiarise yourself with the arrangement of this part of the oral exam, looking closely at the mark scheme, revising how to ask a question, and then gaining confidence in answering an unseen question. So obviously I won't be going into very much detail this evening. This is just revising what I did, just to make sure that anybody that couldn't join in with me on that session can have a little bit of an insight tonight. So I looked quickly at the overall how the examination is it takes place. So it's over 7 to 9 or 10 to 12 minutes, depending on your tier. Quarter of the overall examination, so the quarter of the qualification. I went on then to speak about the instructions from the WJEC for this part of the oral exam. Won't be going through all of that this evening after going through it in so much detail in the presentation itself. The main thing to remember in the role play, to get the 15 marks, 3 marks for each of the 5 bullet points, the main thing to remember is that you don't need to expand on your answer. So once you've given the answer to the prompt, then you don't have to expand, you don't have to give an opinion, for example, unless the prompt specifically asks you to do so. So I think this slide was particularly important to give you an example of a question, how it could have been answered, and the marks that were awarded for each type of answer. So to get the full mark, if we look at the top of each tier here, you do need a full sentence with a verb conjugated correctly. So for example, in the foundation tier, if the question was quelle est la date de ton anniversaire, then you would need to say c'est le and then the number with the month in that order. Okay, so if you just said, for example, 5 septembre, yes, okay, you're answering the question, but you don't have a verb. So to get those full 3 marks, you do need that full answer in the correct tense. For the higher tier then, as you would imagine, the questions are a little bit more complicated. So for example, qu'est-ce que tu préfères manger à une fête? So what's your favourite thing to eat at a party? So again, in order to get the full marks, you would need to give your opinion in the present tense, conjugated correctly. For example, the answer given here, j'adore le gâteau d'anniversaire. Okay, so if you just said, for example, the word gâteau, yes, okay, at least you've understood the question. You would be awarded maybe 1 mark, but you don't have the full sentence to reach any higher. So that's an important thing to note here. Full sentences conjugated correctly in the correct tense. You will also need to ask a question during the role play, depending, it doesn't matter whether you're doing the foundation or the higher paper, you will definitely need to ask a question back. So 3 different ways of doing that, and I went through all of these in more detail during my session, but just really quickly, intonation is just raising the tone of your voice at the end. So for example, tu es un animal becomes tu es un animal, just raising your voice at the end like you would in English. You could also add est-ce que at the beginning just to make it crystal clear that you are asking a question. Inversion then is when you swap around in the way that's offered on the screen now. So for example, again, tu es un animal is a statement. but if you've swapped around so that the verb becomes first, so as-tu un animal? Quite an easy way of asking a question, inversion. Question words then you really need to revise if you're not confident. So I went through all of these in my session. Comment, qui, que, où, quand, depuis quand, combien, à quelle heure, quel, spelled differently depending on the gender and number, avec qui, and pourquoi. So please make sure you revise all question words if you're not confident with those. This was an exercise I put into my presentation just so that you could practice asking questions, asking you to complete the question in order so that the question makes sense using one of the words or maybe some others. That wasn't an exhaustive list of questions. So for example, how are you going to Italy? By putting in the word como, question word como. So that was an exercise that I invited you to do. And then I asked you as well to translate the sentences just to make sure that you understood exactly what those question words were asking and what question they were producing. Okay, so these are the answers for the translation exercise of those 10 sentences. So putting in the question word first and then translating the whole sentence. Okay, I then moved on to giving you examples of the exam paper itself. So I gave foundation examples and higher examples as well, just so that you could see the layout of the paper itself. So the one on the left is the foundation, the one on the right is the higher. So as I said before, 5 bullet points. You will definitely have a prompt saying, answer the question. So that's the unseen question, which you wouldn't have seen beforehand during your preparation time. And you will definitely as well need to ask a question back to your teacher. Okay, so that's the answer to the question. It's not always the 3rd bullet point. It could come anywhere really in those 5 prompts. And I also gave you the teacher's copy as well, the examiner's copy, so that you could see exactly what their side of the script was as well. So for example, this is the foundation paper's unseen question, which is asking you, when do you use the internet? So that's testing that you understand the question word quand. And then in the higher, it was combien de temps est-ce que tu passes sur ton portable? So how much time do you spend on your mobile phone? So combien de temps, how much time? That's that unseen question. So really, really useful for you to look through the past papers on the exam website. But you know, always make sure that you're trying to think, right, what could these unseen questions be? Think about the context. What question would you imagine could come up during this role play? Okay, so if you have time in your preparation time, then try and think, what could the unseen question be? I then took those examples of papers, so the one on the left for the foundation, for example, and I put in some possible answers which would have gotten you full marks each time. Okay, so these are the foundation examples, and I've given in red there as well exactly what you would have needed to get your full 3 marks each time. Okay, so giving your opinion for number 1, what your favourite website is for number 2. This was the unseen question. So you would have only seen answer the question, but we've just seen that the question was quand utilises-tu l'internet? And it's asking you to say j'utilise. So I use present tense. And then there will always be a question in a different tense as well in the foundation. So of course the present, and then this is an example asking you to speak in the past tense using the perfect. So j'ai lu, for example, perfect tense. And then asking your teacher a question back using the inversion technique on the screen this time. Okay, this is for the higher tier, exactly the same. So I won't spend too much time going through this. Exactly the same, just giving possible answers which would have received full marks for each bullet point. You may ask your teacher to repeat. So if you don't understand, or if maybe you've misheard the question, it's no problem at all for you to ask your teacher to repeat the question. Just be mindful that they will not be allowed to say it in a different way. They won't be able to change the way that they ask the question. They must stick to the script for the role play. So I've also put in some past papers. So this is all available on the Carlam Cymru website, this presentation for the role play. So these are some more examples for you to prepare. I've also, though, put in what the unseen question is, so that you can prepare for that as well. And then the third, so I've given one for each broad theme. And then the same for the higher, 3 papers, 1 for each broad theme. And again, putting in the unseen question. So note as well how they are in different places. So it's not always the same bullet point. And the same goes for the ask your teacher, ask the question. That's a different bullet point as well. They don't always come in the same order. And that's the third, for the third broad theme. My top tips then were to not say too much, answer the question, but in a simple and correct way. Answer in full sentences each time. Be mindful of the tense. Is it present? Is it past? Is it future? Is it conditional? And conjugate the verb accordingly. Always be prepared to ask a question. You definitely will need to do that as well. And try and prepare thoroughly for the unseen question. Best way to do that is to make sure that your question words are thoroughly revised as well. Useful links that I put into my presentation. Again, this is all available in the presentation on the Carlam Cymru website. Okay, so my second session was on the sub-theme, enterprise, employability and future plans. This is the theme which can sometimes look a bit tricky. So we decided to concentrate on this sub-theme in this year's session. So the objectives for my second session were to familiarise yourself with the topics covered in this sub-theme, to look at each skill and examination in relation to those topics, to look at knowledge organisers on each sub-theme, and I'll explain that more thoroughly in a second, and then to practice skills required in relation to the sub-theme in question as well. Okay, so we're looking at the third main broad theme, current and future study and employment, but the sub-theme we're looking at is enterprise, employability and future plans. Sub-theme then would be those 4 bullet points at the end of that table. So taking each of those in turn, these are the kinds of things that you will be examined on and vocabulary about. So skills and personal qualities, post-16 study, so whether you're staying for sixth form or going to college, career plans for the future, all of these things popping up on the screen now, and then employment in general, advantages, disadvantages of employment, work experience, talking about money, what do you do with the money that you earn if you have a part-time job yourself. Okay, so I had then a knowledge organiser for each of the sub-themes. So 4 of these, and I went through some detail in my session, but I won't do so tonight, obviously. And that's the last one, employment. And then taking each skill, each exam in its turn, I went through and just discussed each question for the oral examination first. So we've just spoken in a bit more length about the le jeu de rôle, the role play. So this is the first question of the oral exam, and this is an example foundation paper for the role play. This is the examiner's copy so that you can see the unseen question, which is the third prompt. Quelle langue parles-tu? So which languages do you speak? Okay, so that's an example of how this sub-theme could look in the role play. Okay, and there are some possible responses there then on the screen. Any of those would have received full marks. Higher, exactly the same really. I've put an example of a role play for the higher paper. That's the unseen question. So quelles sont vos qualités personnelles? So what are your personal qualities? And some possible responses here, which would have given you full marks as well. So the second question of the oral exam then is the photocard description. And I've put in the unseen questions here for you as well, because in the photocard there are unseen questions which you will not have seen beforehand. So just for you to get an idea of what kind of questions could come up. Okay, there is the conversation in the oral exam as well, but I've tagged that in with the writing because preparing for one really helps you to prepare for the other. Listening exercise then, this is available for you in this PowerPoint presentation on the Cadwlader Cymru website. I won't play this tonight, but what you needed to do is to choose a word from the word bank in order to complete the sentence after listening to Luke speak about his job. And then the responses, the answers for you there as well. And I've also given the transcript so that you can maybe listen and read at the same time. Reading, I've put in an example of a letter sent to a bank in order to show some, an interest in a job which is he's seen being advertised. So some questions that you may see in a reading exam. How has he found out about the position? Where's he working at the moment and since when? How has he developed his skills? And 3 qualities which he claims to have. So all of those responses can be found in the letter. Translation and exercise for the reading paper is always from French into English. So looking at the tense to start with, j'ai travaillé, so we're looking at the perfect tense, worked. So again, won't go through these in much detail, seeing as they have been done in my longer presentation on this subject. And then, as I said, I've put in the conversation preparation with the writing, and I've put in some example questions which you should try and answer using the knowledge organisers that I put in at the beginning. If you can try and get some answers to these questions, different tenses, which would prepare you for the conversation, for the oral exam, and for the writing exam as well then for this sub-theme. So a variety of questions there. And then lastly, I put in a translation exercise for you on this theme. And in the writing exam, you translate from English then into French. So I've given the WJC's answer here. This is what they suggest would be a good answer for this translation question. And I've put in a check table there as well, just for you to make sure that you've done as much as you can to try and get highest marks possible. Revision then as well, I've put in some links for this topic. And then I just wanted to wish you bonne chance, good luck, before I hand over to Madame Pritchard. Okay, so if I stop sharing now then, Madame Pritchard. There we go. Okay, just give us a second as we try and swap over. So Madame Pritchard, have you put your...
Hello.
Hello.
Bonjour. Yes,
Bonjour.
so my presentation is there. Can you see my presentation?
I'm just looking for it. No, I don't think I can.
Right.
Oh, sorry, yes, I can, but I don't have it in the content at the bottom, but I don't think that's a problem.
Right.
Let me just try and add in your video.
If you want to leave your video up, that's fine, because my background hasn't come up as a Cadwlader background for some reason.
Oh, right, okay.
I can still talk through the slides, but then I may not be able to. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm having trouble putting your video in at the moment.
Right. Can you see my PowerPoint if I move
I
it
can.
forward? Is
Yes, I
that
can.
excellent? Okay, so I'll talk through it
There
anyway.
we go. Okay.
Great. So, good evening, everybody. So, we're going to carry on with the themes now that we looked at. So I'm going to be focusing on expressing an opinion and recycling language. And my name is Mrs. Pritchard and I work in Brodir. So the two objectives, the first one was comment donner son avis en français, so given an opinion in French. I'll come back to the second objective in a moment. So given an opinion is hugely important for French GCSE. You'll have to give your opinion on any of the topics that Mrs. Williams has gone through with you just now. So what I did in my PowerPoint is I went through a variety of sentence starters for giving opinions. Some of them I'm sure you've used since year 7, and some of them are perhaps more new. So what I would suggest is go through and just learn a variety. You don't have to learn them all. As long as you have a variety of sentence starters, you will be able to talk on several themes, giving your opinion on lots of different issues just by learning a few of these. So in the blue box, we have things like à mon avis, selon moi, according to me, d'après moi, similar, pour moi, quant à moi, for me. So they all roughly mean the same thing. Until we get to personnellement, then sans aucun doute, peut-être, c'est possible, a kind of answers you if the teacher says, do you like something? So for example, tu aimes le sport? Then you could maybe use some of these as a thinking moment while you're trying to get yourself, especially in the speaking exam, where you're trying to think about what's your next sentence going to be. So definitely, perhaps it's possible. And then we have c'est évident que or il est évident que. The middle box then, the grey box, are things like je pense que, je crois que, je trouve que. So I think that, I believe that, I find that. Je veux dire que is sort of what I mean is, je dirais que, I would say that. Il est vrai que, je sais que, I know that. Je suis sûre que. I've put the pink E there, which is mainly for the writing element. If you identify as female, then you would add the extra E there. And then j'ai l'impression que. And I just put here at the top that many of these would take the subjunctive when used in the negative. I don't know how your teacher feels about this, but to be honest, I don't push subjunctive a lot until A level. I think that at GCSE, you can still get an A star, even if you don't use the subjunctive correctly. But obviously your teacher may disagree, so you'll probably be better off going with your teacher's advice on that one, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. And in the orange box there, we have things like j'adore, j'aime, je n'aime pas, je déteste, which you probably learnt early on in your French studies. J'admire, j'imagine que, me plaît ou m'intéresse is a nice way to sort of change the order. So la mode me plaît or la mode m'intéresse is nice to switch it around. And I think it shows more complex language, because if you look at the mark scheme, which I'll show you later, in order to get the top band of marks, they like you to use more complex language. So I would say that that's probably more complex than j'adore ou j'aime. J'ai horreur de, en ce qui concerne. En ce qui concerne is a lovely way of introducing a theme. So for example, en ce qui concerne le sport. So as for or regarding sport, and then you go on to give your opinion. So I would say again, that's quite a complex language, which would probably be more likely to impress the examiner. And I've said here in the orange box then that you could also include an adverb like beaucoup, bien, trop, etc., just to add a little bit more detail to your opinion. Once you've given your starting sentence of what you're talking about, so for example, j'aime le sport, or à mon avis, le sport est fantastique, whatever you do, you would then use this linking word, parce que, car, ou puisque. Roughly they all mean because, puisque is since, but it's got the same kind of sense as a because. So that's the linking bit, and then you would have to give your reason. So to give your reason, you're going to need to revise and learn some adjectives. So I've given you les adjectifs positifs, the blue side here are more positive adjectives, and les adjectifs négatifs in orange there, more negative adjectives. And I've tried to pick adjectives here that are quite versatile, that you could use for lots and lots of different themes or topics. So things like super, génial, fantastique, chouette, they good ones because you can use them to talk about lots of different things. And then on the negative side, ennuyeux, barbant, boring, embêtant, annoying, fatigant, tiring, nul, rubbish, affreux, awful. So they're quite good adjectives, and I went through those in the original PowerPoint. But there are thousands of adjectives. So I would also suggest you learn some adjectives on different themes. I think that comes up in a second if you bear with me. Also, I think it's important to remember that when you're using adjectives, at times you will need to ensure that the adjectives agree with the gender of whatever you're talking about, the person or the noun that you're talking about. So is it masculine or feminine? So for example, le sport, masculine, but then la mode, fashion, would be feminine. So if you were saying la mode est amusant, then you'd have to put the E on the end. So it would become la mode est amusante, but le sport est amusant. So speaking, obviously there's a slight difference in pronunciation, and writing you would add the E on the end for the feminine agreements if you were talking about something feminine. And also you have to agree it with le nombre, singulier, pluriel. So if you're using a singular or a plural, so for example, if you were talking about les devoirs, homework, it's plural. So then you would make the adjective plural as well. So les devoirs sont, trying to think of an amusant, if you think homework is fun, with an S on the end. It's silent when you're speaking, but you would write an S if you were writing it down. Obviously, in the PowerPoint, I did talk about how if you use c'est ou ce sont, you haven't got to worry about the feminine agreement. So you could say la mode, c'est amusant, without the E, and that would be fine. Okay. Also the position of adjectives. I talked about the position of adjectives in the original PowerPoint as well. So most adjectives come after the noun, but there are exceptions. So this little poster here, which I found online, demonstrates the adjectives that come before the noun. So that's explained at the top there. And then, yes, so I did say, il faut se préparer à tous les thèmes. So as you saw in the PowerPoint just now with Mrs. Williams, these are the themes that you need to learn, and you will need to perhaps learn a couple of adjectives for each specific theme as well. I think that would be a good idea. It would be quite sensible to do that. Also in my PowerPoint, I talked about how the themes link together. So for example, Mrs. Williams just looked at enterprise employability and future plans, and these all link together really. They could all come in the same booklet really, because they're useful to link with each other. And then this also links to school and college life and studies. It could link to travel and transport if you say what your future plans are. And so on. There are links. So once you've learned some adjectives for one theme, they could help with another theme as well. So I just looked at maybe food and drink. You could learn things like délicieux, savoureux, dégoûtant, affreux, bon pour la santé, things like that would be more specific to a topic. Another example I did was the environment, that you might want to learn some specific adjectives for all of the topics, I would say. Not necessarily this many, but I would say maybe 4 or 5 for each of the themes. So that was the given your opinion, comment donner So na fi. And then the second PowerPoint I did, the second session I did was comment recycler la langue pour l'utiliser dans l'examen oral et écrit. Sorry, the T is missing there. So recycling language. What I tell my children in school is when you learn certain structures and sentence starters, certain vocabulary, certain adjectives, you can recycle those then for use in several different themes. So this is just a rough idea of some of them, but I'm sure if you go through your work, your school work, you will pick out certain sentence starters that come up quite a lot frequently, and then you can reuse those then for different themes. So things like il est important de, il faut, je crois que, something m'intéresse, j'aimerais, je dirais que. So you think about these and then recycle them and use them for different themes. It just saves you work. It's much easier than trying to learn lots and lots of different sentences or paragraphs. If you learn those sentence structures, then it can be really useful for you. So I found this nice thing about recycling online. If you reuse and recycle language, there'll be less to learn and revise, so you'll be happier. So happier earth and a happier you if you reduce, reuse and recycle your language. This then is an example of an assessment grid for the photocard discussion. For example, if you look at all of the assessment grids, they're pretty similar. Most of them are asking for similar things. So for example, detailed information, extended responses, able to express and justify thoughts, points of view and exchange opinions. And remember that justify is really important. You must always say why you think something, which again expands your answer. And so that's looking at the given points of view and opinions. And also then with regards to recycling language, excellent language, wide variety of vocabulary and grammatical structures, including complex structures. So we looked at some of those earlier too. High levels of accuracy and references to the past, present and future events, which we looked at last year. So you could look back at some of the previous sessions on the Gwersi Carlan website where we've looked at tenses in the past. So I just thought then, just to finish off, maybe you could give it a go. I don't think anyone's joined the live session, so if you're watching this as a recording, a good idea would be to pause after each of the questions. You try to translate and then you can press play then to check the answers. So if we look at the structure il y a, il n'y a pas de, so there is or there isn't, and then I just put 3 examples of some simple sentences to practice those structures. So for example, there's a lot to do in the town. So you could pause there and the answer would be il y a beaucoup à faire en ville. The next one, there's not enough freedom. If we think about school rules and things like that. So if you translate and then the answer would be il n'y a pas assez de liberté. And then the third one, there's too much homework. And the answer would be il y a trop de devoirs. I've also put in there something that my pupils struggle with sometimes is the beaucoup, assez, trop, assez de, trop de. Beaucoup is often followed by de if there's a lot of, but lots to do, beaucoup à faire. So little things like this have been catching my students out, so I thought I'd include them just as a little aside. Another example, il faut, il ne faut pas. So for example, you have to work hard would be il faut travailler dur. You mustn't eat too much chocolate. I should tell myself that. And the answer would be il ne faut pas manger trop de chocolat. And the third one, you must recycle. Oh, I think there's typo there. You must recycle every day. And the answer would be il faut recycler tous les jours ou chaque jour. Either would be fine. And then another one. Il est important de, il n'est pas important de. It is important to look after the environment. Would be, il est important de prendre soin de l'environnement. Fashion isn't important to me. La mode n'est pas importante pour moi. So there's an example there of where we've had to use a feminine agreement for la mode. And the third one, I think it's very important to do sports often. Sport. Je pense qu'il est très important de faire du sport souvent. Time words are really useful as well. Always, sometimes, from time to time, never. I would suggest you learn those as well. And the last one, je devrais, je ne devrais pas. So I should do more revision. Je devrais faire plus de révision. I should go to bed early. I'm always tired. I'm just trying to pause slowly just for you to pause the recording. Je devrais me coucher tôt. Je suis toujours fatiguée. And obviously, if you identify as a girl, you would add the extra E for the written exam. And I shouldn't drink Coke. It's bad for your health. Je ne devrais pas boire du coca. C'est mauvais pour la santé. Okay, so the examples, what I try to do there is just to show you that when you learn a structure, you can use that sentence starter, that structure, for lots and lots of different sentences, different themes. You can use it in the positive and in the negative form. And I say, I've got a terrible memory, really bad memory. I couldn't learn hundreds of answers off by heart. I would be hopeless. But what I can do is once I've learned a structure, I can recycle it and reuse it. And I try to tell my pupils, I think it's easier to do that than trying to learn hundreds of sentences off by heart. Learn a structure and then learn how to transform it into other categories, into other themes. And then as for given opinions, I just put 3 questions here as an example of given opinions. So we could have, que penses-tu de la France? Again, you could pause the recording and give an answer either orally or writing it down, and then you can press play just to see my answer. My answer is not an ideal answer, it's just a suggestion. So I've put, personnellement, j'adore la France, c'est un beau pays, la cuisine est la meilleure du monde, aussi j'aime perfectionner mon français. So you could go on then and give different reasons. So I've put personnellement there, I've put j'adore, I've put j'aime. I've used an adjective there, c'est un beau pays, to justify why I think it. And I've talked about the food as well, best in the world. The second question, tu aimes quelle sorte de musique? So if you pause, answer, and my suggestion is, en général, j'aime toutes sortes de musique, mais je dirais que je préfère la comédie musicale comme genre. Oh, sorry, excuse that, I've the Spanish, sorry, I've done the PowerPoint in French and Spanish, so I forgot to delete that, sorry. That's just an example, so I've used there en général, I've used j'aime, I've used je dirais que, I've used je préfère, and I could also have used some adjectives there as well to describe it. And the third and final question, il est important d'apprendre des langues étrangères. Tu es d'accord? So often, I would say particularly in the photo card, they'll give you a sentence and then they'll ask you, do you agree with it or what do you think about that sentence? So it's important to learn foreign languages. Do you agree? So I've put, oui, je suis d'accord, bien sûr, of course. Il est vraiment important pour plusieurs raisons. And then you could go on to list them, okay? So that's the quiz part. So I would just say, comment réussir, how to succeed, learn a variety of ways to express an opinion, things like à mon avis, je pense que, selon moi, etc. Learn a variety of adjectives on various themes. Oh, another typo there. Positive and negative. And remember how to use adjectives, masculine or feminine agreements, singular or plural agreements, and they can be before or after the noun. And as for the recycling language, so just remember to learn vocabulary and sentences on all of the themes. So that's nouns, adjectives and verbs. And express an opinion, positive and negative with justifications, and then just look at some grammar, so conjugating verbs, different tenses, how to agree adjectives. It all links together really. Everything you do, everything you learn, everything you revise, everything you practice will support you and help you make progress in lots of other areas. It all links together. So vous avez des questions. If you have any questions, you could type them in the Q&A, or if you want to maybe ask your teachers in school if you haven't listened to the session live. And as Mrs. Williams said, let's say bonne chance. Good luck to you for your exams. I hope it all goes well. The more effort you put in, the more successful you'll be, I believe. So good luck, work hard, bonne chance, et au revoir.